Welcome to Have Lifelong Wellbeing and my first video that is attached to my newsletter, edition number 47, the August 2018 edition, where it is part 2 of how to have a strong pelvic core. If you want to review part 1, please do that before this video because it might give you a better understanding. But I want this video to be very short and brief so that it doesn't take you forever. I wanted you to preview the exercises that I talk about in part 2 that teach you how to have a nice, strong, healthy pelvic core. Now, obviously, we live in the land of litigation, so I don't want you to try anything that's going to hurt you. This is for educational purposes only. I am not teaching you specifically these exercises. I am showing them to you so you'll understand what's involved with making sure you have a healthy, strong pelvic core. Okay? So the first thing I talked about was it's very, very important not to sit all day long, because when you sit all day long, you are, no matter if you have an $800 chair or what your ergonomic setup is at the office, if you sit for more than 15 minutes, you will start to round out that lower back. When that lower back starts to round out, the head comes forward. Everything is very, very not the way it was designed to be when it comes to strength and support and good stability in your spine. So you really want good lumbar curve here. And the only way to do that is to get up regularly throughout the day. So set your phone, set something so that you can stand up and do this every 10 to 15 minutes. It only takes 7 seconds. I set my phone at home when I'm working on my computer, when I'm writing my book, when I'm doing all those things I'm doing, and I'm sitting too long. You really need to be getting up. You're compressing that back line. You're sitting on your glutes. They are losing strength because muscles don't fire when you sit on them. And so you really need to be getting up. I cannot emphasize that enough. You must get up regularly throughout the day. And a standing desk is not much better because, again, you're standing in one position and you're not moving around. So you really need to be moving. Our bodies were designed to move, not to sit still for hours on end in any position, okay? So the exercises that I talked about squats, I talked about foot slides, stride forward reach, I talked about hip internal external rotation with both mobility and stability, and I talked about eccentrically loading the abs. So I'm going to briefly demonstrate those to you. Again, this isn't meant to teach you how to exercise, but for you to understand what these exercises are, okay? A posterior squat. I call it a posterior squat. That's my nickname for it. A lot of people, when they do squats, you know, they come down, their knees go forward slightly. It's not that that's a horrible thing. If your knees aren't happy knees, they may not like that, but it works the quads more. I want you to do what I call a posterior squat because it works those back muscles, okay? So your knees are going to be against the chair, heels under the chair just slightly, and you want to keep those knees back when you go down. This isn't about touching your toes, it's about getting your butt near the chair, okay? But you've got to counterbalance, so your shoulders have to go forward. If you feel like your toes are coming up and you're kind of falling backward a little bit, you're doing it right. If your balance isn't all that great, do it holding on to something, okay? That's the squat. You're going to work all those posterior muscles and feel them working nicely. The foot slide. The foot slide is exactly what it says. My foot is going to slide back, and I'm going to go straight down with my chin. It's not a backward lunge. The lower my head and shoulders go, tiny little bend in this knee, not much. So those of you who don't have happy knees, this might be okay for you. And you're going to feel it right here in the posterior lateral deep hip muscles. That's where you want to feel it. Now, the hands are just for safety. If you don't need them, you don't need them. But it's important that you're coming straight down. So you can do this at the sink, anything that has a good height for you, depending on how tall or how short you are. All right? Next, I'm going to show you stride forward reach. Stride forward reach. Oh, and obviously with the foot slides, you would do that both legs. The stride forward reach, if I have my right foot forward, the toes are lined up with the edge of the chair, front knee is bent, back leg is straight, and I'm going to just come down and tap the seat. Now, if your bottom's going back, you don't have good stability, all right? So this wouldn't be good for you. You'd have to tweak it. I'm not going to teach that here. This is just a brief demonstration video. But you want to come down and just tap the back of the seat. The right knee is coming forward as I do this, and I'm feeling my toes grip the floor to keep my balance. And again, you would do that on both sides, okay? Now, the hip rotation, internal and external rotation, and stability versus mobility. Okay, so mobility is how much a joint moves, the range of motion that it has available to it. Stability is how well that joint stabilizes you so that you don't fall down when you're challenging that joint, okay? So I'm going to show you the difference between all of those. Now, when you externally rotate your hip, you are turning away from it. So if I'm going to externally rotate my left hip, I'm going to turn away to the right. And now that's externally rotated. And so this is a range of motion thing. How much external rotation do I have? The same thing on the other side, okay? How much external rotation does my right hip have? You keep your knees nice and soft so you're not hurting your knees. Now, internal rotation is the opposite. So if I'm testing the internal on my left hip, I'm going to turn in and put my right foot right in front of my left, kind of like the letter T. And when I did external, it's like the letter L, okay? So I'm going right in front and I keep turning. Again, my knees are nice and soft. That's internal on my left hip. And again, this is range of motion. How much range of motion do I have? Same thing with the right hip. We're going to turn right in there, okay? That's range of motion. Now, if I want to test how stable that joint is, I won't put the other foot down on the ground. I will maintain my balance on that leg. So if I'm going to test the stability of right hip external rotation, remember mobility was making that L and stepping into the other leg. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn and I'm just going to wave my left foot over the floor, and that is how stable is external on my right. And then, of course, the opposite, how stable is external on my left. Same thing with internal. When I make that letter T, I'm not putting my foot down. I'm just testing. Okay? How stable? Can I hang out there? All right? Same thing with the right. Can I hang out there? All right? How stable am I? That's the hips. And if you remember, I did a two-part series on pelvic floor and that issue that goes on. And that was back in 2017. I put 2 links in this newsletter for that. If you didn't read those, you can go back or you can review. And that pelvic floor and hip rotation is huge at keeping you from not needing disposable underwear at some point in your life. You can actually help to resolve that issue if you develop that good stability hip rotation on both sides, internal and external. The last one I'm going to show you is eccentric ab loading. Now, you can do eccentric ab loading without weights. It depends on how strong your abs are. But the goal is, when something is eccentrically loaded, it's lengthened with tension. So if I bend backward, I'm loading here because this is getting longer, but it's trying to keep me from falling over, okay? If I put my arms up, it's even more of a load, all right? So you can just do this. You can just load this way. And you can alternate if you want. You can do right, and you can do left, and you can even get the whole body into it and push through the floor. The more joints you get involved when you do an exercise, the better. But that's going to load. You can also load it with a little bit of tension. So this is a very light resistance band here. And if you have your arms straight overhead with your elbows by your ears, I am going to go backward, and that's loading eccentrically those abs. And then when I come forward, I just come forward just beyond neutral, because the goal is to eccentrically load and then unload. It's not about doing a crunch or a sit-up, okay? So that's demonstrating those exercises that I shared in that newsletter. I'm hoping you really enjoyed it. Let me know if you have any questions. Anything you want to learn about, whether it's with sports or nutrition or pain or manual therapy, you know, any of those questions, research, shoot me an email, tell me, I'll put it in a newsletter, okay? We'll figure it out. But, oh, I almost forgot, the hip flexor stretch. Now, I put on the tip of the month that a muscle can be tight or it can be taut. Now, the difference between tight and taut, you'll understand in the tip of the month. If it's tight and you need to stretch it out, this is how you do it. You put, if I'm going to stretch out the front of my right hip, my left foot goes up on the chair, and I just come forward like this. Just nice, gentle. My hip and knee is coming forward, not my body. And that gives a nice, gentle stretch right there. You can do this in 3 planes. You can stay forward and side to side for frontal and turn. But the goal is to open up the front of that hip, and obviously you would do both sides. Okay? So that's the hip flexor stretch. That's a good way to do it, because you need it to stretch when you're on your feet, when you're walking. Okay? Stretching it on the floor, not as effective. Most things aren't as effective when you're on the floor as they are when you're upright, because that's how we live our life, upright. Okay? So I hope you found this video helpful. And remember, I'm here to help you have lifelong well-being. See you next month.